All right, next up, Prince of Darkness. I have the steel book from Shout Factory on pre-order. I'm really looking forward to that transfer and that copy. So until now, I just got this one. A buddy of mine, Keen, has been championing this film to me for a long time. I have seen it a few times before and was never a huge fan of it. And I always just found it to be slow and this and that. And so this time, I was like, all right, man, not only am I going in to review this thing, but, you know, I want to give it its real fair shot once and for all. Not like I hadn't been before, but just was one of these things where I was like, all right, I'm really going to sit down this time. I'm going to put away my phone. I'm going to put everything down. I'm going to focus 100% on this movie. I'm going to try to interpret everything and whatnot. And I really, really liked the movie this time. A lot. Like, way more than usual. So I'm not only glad that I went back, but I'm glad that my buddy had pushed me to pay closer attention to this film and give it more of a credit. I think because Carpenter had up until this point in the 80s made such straightforward conventional horror, not in a bad way, but the majority of, like, you know, Halloween and The Fog and all those are pretty straightforward. I mean, there's questions left at the end of The Thing and Halloween, like what happened and what happened next. But this one, on the other hand, its storytelling is very open for interpretation from beginning to end. Though, paying attention to it this time, I feel like I have a very good grasp on what did happen. And as I said, this is all for interpretation, so no one's wrong in this. It's just, I like the interpretation I came up with this time, and now I am a big fan, and I'm very much looking forward to the Blu-ray release so I can see a much cleaner picture. This was written and directed by Carpenter, despite it saying that it was written by Martin Quatermass. I'm a big fan of the Quatermass trilogy from Hammer, and that's obviously a nod to that character in the Quatermass films. Great films, by the way, especially actually all three of them are really, really good, but the first one's great. And this is Carpenter's return to horror after 4 years away, and he went off and he did Starman and Big Trouble in Little China, and he wrote, the one I just watched, the Black Moon Rising. And so I know he had some troubles with the studios. He made Starman and Big Trouble in Little China with studios, and he hated that experience, and Big Trouble in Little China bombed, even though it's a masterpiece. Doesn't really matter if it doesn't make money. No one, the studios don't give a shit. So he went back to independent for this and got full creative control. And he did something very different here. I mean, you rarely ever get to see a movie of any kind that is trying to meld science and religion together and kind of putting them at odds with each other and mixing them together and stirring them in a pot and see what happens. And I really, really enjoyed it this time. I don't know if it's maybe just my age because I haven't seen it in 5-10 years or something. Could be it. Maybe I was just paying closer attention. This is film 2 of the Apocalypse trilogy, as Carpenter says, with The Thing being first, this one being second, and In the Mouth of Madness being third. Now, anytime I had brought up the Apocalypse trilogy in the past, I had always talked about how The Thing is amazing. Prince of Darkness was meh, and In the Mouth of Madness is amazing. So it was kind of like this, like big drop in the middle. But now on this viewing, I'm like, well, wow, that's a great trilogy. Shit, if this really is a trilogy, then man, this is frickin' fantastic. And we get, it's, as I've said in other reviews here, like, it's fun to see who he picks up along the way and brings on from the next movie. So, you've got Victor Wong and Dennis Dunn from Big Trouble in Little China coming over here, Egg Chen and Wang, and then Donald Pleasance obviously coming back. And I think this is the last time they ever worked together here. And Dr. Loomis's character is Father Loomis, for obvious reasons. The soundtrack, the score is great. I mean, this is just classic Carpenter right here the whole time. You just can tell. And Alan Howarth, of course, is helping him out here, as usual. And talking of cast members that he's going to bring on from here on, Peter Jason, who is in like almost every film from here on for the rest of Carpenter's career. He's only missing from like one or two. But it's cool to see him here because it's like, oh, they had a long standing. I want to say Peter Jason's probably in the most Carpenter movies over Buck Flower or Kurt Russell or Pleasance or anybody, or Jamie Lee Curtis or any of his constant alums that he has in his films. And you know, we get Alice Cooper here, which is cool. Alice Cooper is a huge horror fan, and he totally deserved to be in a Carpenter film because the guy adores horror, and he's a big name, and he's a creepy looking dude, so he works perfectly to be the leader of the homeless. And there's a lot of really creepy, cool imagery, and I think that's where I liked this film more this time especially, is the atmosphere throughout this film is just this like ever-growing presence of dread. Like, it starts and just constantly starts to become more and more dreadful as it goes on, and not in a bad way. Dreadful sounds bad, but like filled with dread. And I love that. I love the tone of this film throughout this time. And a lot of creepy imagery here. The girl typing on the keyboard, you know, I live, you know, you won't be saved by your god plutonium, which is, I'm guessing, is probably a reference to a nuclear bomb. Like, no matter what you do, the strongest weapon you have ain't gonna stop me. Like, once I come out, you're fucked. You have not invented a weapon yet that can take me out. I guess just breaking a mirror is enough. Nuclear bomb's nothing against some broken mirror. 7 years bad luck for him. And the bicycle kill, obviously emulating Alice Cooper's famous mic stand kill he does on stage, which is cool. Although when he falls forward, you would think that bike tire would roll. I mean, there's a tire on the front, and it would not just sit there. It's like a unicycle. It would roll away and he would fall, which I think would have been a cool effect, but whatever, doesn't matter. And I love the dude standing outside who's giving them the message, you know, I got some news for you and you're not gonna like it, or whatever. Or I got a message for you and you're not gonna like it. He he just like starts falling apart all over the ground and bugs start coming out of him. It's just such a great effect. Man, I loved that this time. As I said, like, the more I'm talking about it and after watching this, the more I'm loving it. I think this is excellent. I think this is definitely his unappreciated, I won't call it a masterpiece right now. And maybe in future viewings I'll be like, man, what was I thinking? This is a masterpiece. But for now, I will say this is probably his most unappreciated film, for sure, because the majority of people I talk to are like me, and we're just like, meh, that one's a little off, just something about it. And the more, you know, this time was, anyway, I'm not going to continue to keep repeating myself like I am, but and you know, another thing about horror is one of the scariest things to me personally, dealing with anxiety and whatnot as I have in my life. The thought of someone coming after you, like in Halloween, you know, with Michael Myers, or The Thing, like something being there and coming after you, or The Fog, or, you know, any of these other horror movies that he'd done. What's scarier to me is me losing self-control of myself and not being able to control my actions and taking my own life, or taking, even worse yet, the life of loved ones or people I care about, and I can't do anything about it except for sit back and watch my body do something I don't want it to do. And when this thing starts to come through, you know, once it infects people, it takes over their bodies, and you can see a lot of them are like crying they are messed up because they can't stop themselves. They're not really talking all that much, but they're full on bawling and crying and like slitting their own throats and stuff. God, that just is awful to think about, being sitting in your own body watching this happening. That is scary, man. And that's the kind of shit you take home with you. You're like, am I going to lose self-control? Like, fuck, I don't know. Like, for me, being able to fend off an attacker sounds way more plausible and easy. You can't do anything about your body being taken over. How can you fight back against that? You know? So, yeah, I just think that is terrifying. And the liquid pouring out of the chick's, mouth and eyes up into the ceiling, another great visual there. The guy who gets his neck broken down below and then he comes out and he's just, when he came out, I had to laugh because he looked just like Vincent D'Onofrio's Edgar character from Men in Black, where he's just like that. If you'd have to watch it and see it, because it's pretty fucking funny. And when Dennis Dunn, I can't remember his name in this movie, but when he's on the other side of the wall and they finally start to come through to him, he then grabs something and starts trying to break through the wall. Like, he was going to let them. For one, what a lazy asshole to just be sitting there waiting for them to dig him out, A. And for, B, why weren't you? Double the efforts. Like, you're going to get out of there faster. They're like, it's going to take a couple hours. And he's like, oh, great, it's a couple hours. And it's like, you have this thing. You're breaking through the wall yourself now. Where were you an hour ago? Like, I don't know. That part was silly to me. I was just like, aren't these guys supposed to be geniuses? Aren't they supposed to be super smart? Like, why isn't this guy digging out his side of the wall? Makes no sense. And when Loomis comes in, he's like cutting the limbs off that chick, and then they're just growing back, and cuts the head off. She just pops it back on. Could you imagine? I mean, seriously, that's something I talk about all the time. But could you imagine that happening? You'd lose your fucking mind if you cut the head off of somebody, and they just picked their head back up and just plopped it on their body, and they were like totally fine, and the body like just resealed itself, and it grew another arm. Would you even bother at that point? I think you would just go into catatonic shock. You wouldn't even be able to function. So when you see that stuff, it's terrifying. And then the end of this movie, we get, the broadcast from 1999, and it's the chick. And it's, the images of the person that we saw before clearly seemed to be someone else. It looked more like the black dude in this. So they changed the future. They changed what it was, but it didn't matter because it was coming anyways. Like, they just delayed the inevitable. I think this takes place in like 86 or something, and then like the year the movie was made, and then, or 87, 86, 87, and then it shoots to 99, so like 12 years later, 13 years later. So did they just delay the inevitable? Because basically what I'm gathering from the movie is that this anti-god, this antimatter, was trapped in this thing by these, priests or whatever, and they lock it in a church for thousands of years. And one of, the dude who now protects it in this old abandoned church, he dies and he leaves behind the box, but he doesn't pass on the message or the passing of the torch to anybody. And there's some supernova that sends subatomic particles out and, brings this thing out of its slumber, I guess. And, Loomis's, Dr. Loomis, Priest Loomis here brings in the scientists to try to figure it out with him. And once they start figuring it out, he starts pointing out the fact that it's their disbelief that's making him happen, whatever. And as it starts to come out, it's able to take control of people and eventually be brought through by the Son of God now, or the Son of God, the Son of the Devil, or whatever that chick then becomes. I guess she's just a vessel in order to bring him through. And then she gets pushed in, and mirror's broken, and the connection's broken. And then the guy starts getting dreams of the chick in the future. and he goes to touch the glass, and it's like, you know, does he think he can get to her? Is she calling to him? Is it, you know, it's definitely left open for interpretation, absolutely. And that's a great part of this. I mean, you definitely want to think. And maybe I was just being stubborn before, like I wanted everything spoon-fed to me. And this time I was watching it and being like, no, you know what? Like, I'm going to really just like try to decipher the code and enjoy the imagery and the atmosphere and everything else. And it really worked this time for me, for sure. So anyway, what do you guys think? Are you like how I was and will be forever? Or have you always loved this and you're like, I don't understand how no one ever could have liked this? Or, you know, did you have a moment where you're like, you didn't like it and now you do? I'm curious on what people's thoughts are on this film, because I know this is a film that is normally not discussed all that much. It's definitely never been anyone besides my buddy I was talking to you about, anybody's favorite Carpenter film. So yeah, I'm super curious on what, you know, you guys think, for sure. So let me know. All right, guys, I am moving on to They Live.